The Thompson submachine gun was born in frustration, the kind that only war can create. In the final months of World War I, American General John T. Thompson dreamed of a trench broom, a weapon that could sweep away enemy soldiers like dust. His vision was a compact automatic firearm firing the heavy .45 ACP cartridge, the same round as the Colt M1911 pistol, slow, massive, and with tremendous stopping power at close range. But the war ended before his dream could reach the front. When the armistice came in November 1918, the trenches were quiet, and his new weapon had no battlefield to conquer. The first production run of Thompsons, completed in 1921 by Auto Ordnance, had no army waiting for them. So they went instead to the only customers who wanted such firepower: police departments, security firms, and soon the criminal underworld itself. In the roaring 1920s, the Tommy gun became legend for all the wrong reasons. It roared from the hands of gangsters in Chicago and New York, spraying .45 slugs across alleys and warehouses. The press gave it a name that stuck forever: the Chicago typewriter. Photographs of men in fedoras and trench coats gripping the Thompson turned it from a prototype into an icon. When prohibition agents and gangsters both carried the same weapon, it blurred the line between law and crime, between order and chaos. By the time the Great Depression began, the Thompson was both feared and famous, a symbol of unstoppable firepower. Yet behind the headlines, General Thompson's dream had not died. He had wanted a soldier's weapon, not a gangster's toy. Through the 1930s, as tensions built in Europe and Asia, Auto Ordnance kept refining the design, working to transform the flashy 1928 model into something simpler, sturdier, and ready for war. The original 1928 had been elegant but overly complicated. It used a Blish lock system, a finely machined actuator, and expensive milled parts. It could fire 800 to 900 rounds per minute, impressive but hard to control, and even harder to manufacture in quantity. When Britain and France fell in 1940, the United States realized that war was inevitable. The Army began to look at every weapon in its inventory and saw potential in the Thompson. With some changes, it could become the close-quarters weapon American troops lacked. Engineers went to work. They removed the Blish lock entirely, simplifying the bolt into a straight blowback design. They replaced the delicate adjustable sights with rugged stamped ones, removed the cuts compensator from the muzzle, and dropped the expensive drum magazines that gangsters had loved, opting instead for simple 20 and 30-round box magazines that could be produced by the thousands. The result was leaner, tougher, and easier to build. This was no longer the shiny, nickel-plated weapon of the 1920s. It was a soldier's gun, functional, heavy, reliable, and ugly in the way a tank is ugly. The new variant entered production in 1942 under the name Thompson Submachine Gun Caliber .45 M1, and soon after its even simpler successor, the M1A1. The war had stripped the Thompson of glamour and turned it into an instrument of pure survival. The M1A1 kept the soul of the original but was optimized for combat. It fired from an open bolt using a fixed firing pin milled into the bolt face, which simplified manufacturing even further. The cyclic rate slowed slightly to around 600-700 rounds per minute, perfect for controllable bursts. It retained the same .45 ACP cartridge, each bullet a 230-grain hammer of lead, capable of smashing through doors, helmets, or bone at close range. Soldiers joked that it didn't so much shoot men as punch them down. In the testing fields of Aberdeen Proving Ground, officers observed how the Thompson could empty a 30-round magazine in less than 3 seconds, a short, savage flood of fire that could stop a charge cold. The Army Ordnance reports praised its reliability, its raw stopping power, and its simplicity. By 1942, production lines at Savage Arms and Auto Ordnance's Bridgeport plant were running day and night. America was preparing for a two-ocean war, and the Thompson would go with it. It was issued first to paratroopers, tank crews, engineers, and officers, anyone who needed a compact weapon that could turn hallways or foxholes into killing grounds. By the summer of 1943, crates of M1A1s were crossing the Atlantic and Pacific both, bound for the sands of North Africa, the hills of Sicily, and the jungles of Guadalcanal. To the men who opened those crates, the weapon felt heavy, solid, almost alive. Its steel and walnut spoke of purpose. It wasn't graceful like a rifle, nor sleek like a pistol. It was blunt, confident, American. The moment soldiers fired it, they understood why it had once ruled the streets, and why now it would rule the battlefield. The first bursts that echoed across the Mediterranean shocked even the men firing them. The Thompson's report was deep and harsh, its recoil a rolling push rather than a kick. Bullets chewed through plaster, wood, and sandbags with terrifying speed. In narrow alleys and stone farmhouses, it became the loudest voice in the war. German troops who first faced it in Tunisia and Sicily would later write in Disbelief about its fury, a compact gun that spat fire faster than any submachine gun they knew, firing heavy slugs that hit like artillery. They had no idea that this brutal weapon had once been designed for trench fighting a generation earlier, forgotten, then reborn. In its rebirth, the Thompson had finally found the war it was meant for, and in the months ahead, it would earn a new name, whispered with respect and fear on both sides of the battlefield: the American trench broom. By the time the first M1A1 Thompsons reached the front, it was clear that America had built something unlike anything the Germans had ever seen. The MP-40, the Wehrmacht's standard submachine gun, was neat, light, and precise, firing the fast, sharp 9mm parabellum round. But the M1A1 was a different kind of animal. It wasn't elegant. It was feral. It didn't chatter. It roared. Its bullets were slower, heavier, and struck like sledgehammers. The Thompson didn't just wound, it ended fights. That difference, both mechanical and psychological, would define every close-quarters encounter that followed. The M1A1 was built for wartime necessity, brutal simplicity forged out of industrial urgency. It measured 32 inches long, weighed nearly 11 pounds loaded, and was machined from solid steel and American walnut. Soldiers joked it was the gun that doubles as a club, and it wasn't far from the truth. Many GIs used it as such when the fight closed to bayonet distance. Yet its heft also made it stable. The recoil of the .45 ACP cartridge, though powerful, was tamed by the weapon's weight and balance. Its fixed firing pin and straight blowback action made it astonishingly reliable in dirt, mud, and sand. There was little to go wrong. No locking lugs, no fragile parts. Pull the bolt back, load a magazine, release, and it was ready. Simplicity was its genius. When the trigger was squeezed, the Thompson spat out 600 to 700 rounds per minute, a rate that could strip the bark off trees or erase a squad in seconds. Each .45 ACP round was a slow-moving, fat slug, traveling roughly 850 feet per second, half the velocity of a rifle bullet, but with more than double the frontal mass. It didn't slice through the air like a rifle round. It slammed into it. At close range, that meant pure stopping power. A single hit in the chest could drop a man instantly, even through winter clothing or light cover. German soldiers, used to the smaller 9mm round, were stunned by its impact. In captured after-action notes from Sicily, one report described it bluntly. The American machine pistol fires very large bullets. A hit anywhere incapacitates. The weapon's internal design reflected wartime efficiency. The M1A1's bolt was a single block of steel with a machined firing pin, eliminating the delicate separate pin of the M1. Its safety and selector were reduced to two switches, safe, and fire. The old full-auto, semi-auto toggle from the 1928 model was gone. The M1A1 was full-auto only, designed to unleash controlled chaos. Its 30-round stick magazines made of stamped steel were cheap, disposable, and easy to reload. Soldiers could carry several across their chest, tied with tape or webbing. In practice, most fired short bursts, 2 to 3 rounds, walking their shots up walls or through windows. Veteran users learned to fire by feel, timing their bursts with the weapon's natural rhythm. Technically, the M1A1 had a cyclic rate slower than the original 1928. But that reduction made it far more controllable. The 1928 could burn through its drum magazine in under 4 seconds, scattering rounds everywhere. The M1A1's 600 to 700 RPM rate meant its bursts stayed on target. That rhythm, a heavy, steady beat instead of a frantic buzz, made it distinct on the battlefield. Soldiers could recognize a Thompson's growl from a mile away, a deep mechanical drum roll in contrast to the staccato zip-zip-zip of German MP40s. At ranges under 50 yards, the Thompson dominated every engagement. In the ruined streets of Palermo, the alleys of Naples, or the confined rooms of Normandy villages, its effectiveness bordered on terrifying. One American lieutenant described it as a thunderstorm in your hands. In tight corners, there was no time for aiming, just instinct. You pointed, pressed, and let the gun talk. The .45 ACP cartridge, though designed for pistols, proved ideal for these close encounters. Its subsonic speed prevented the sharp crack of a supersonic round, and its heavy slug carried immense energy without overpenetration. A bullet that missed wouldn't ricochet far. A one that hit didn't need to hit twice. This made the Thompson deadly in confined environments, trenches, tunnels, and buildings. A German corporal captured near Salerno wrote during interrogation, "The American small gun, it spits like fire. We had never seen one so fast or so strong. The bullet knocks a man down even when it does not kill him." But that power came at a cost. The M1A1 consumed ammunition at a frightening rate. A single soldier could burn through a full combat load in less than 2 minutes of sustained fire. Resupply became a constant challenge. Ammunition belts sagged under the weight of .45 rounds, each cartridge nearly twice as heavy as a 9mm. Infantry platoons learned to ration bursts carefully. Commanders warned, every squeeze of that trigger costs you a handful of bullets and maybe a life if you run dry. Still, no one complained when clearing a house or repelling a charge. In those moments, the Thompson was worth its weight in gold. Another challenge was range. The M1A1's effective reach was limited to about 100 yards. Beyond that, accuracy fell sharply as the heavy bullets dropped fast. For open ground combat, soldiers switched to M1 Garands or BARs. But inside the mazes of Italian towns and hedgerow lanes of France, nothing could replace it. The Thompson's domain was close, brutal, and human. Despite its limitations, soldiers trusted it with their lives. It almost never jammed. Its open bolt design helped keep it cool, and its sturdy build withstood abuse that would ruin lighter guns. Stories spread of Thompson still firing after being dropped in mud, sand, or seawater. Marines in the Pacific swore it would run dirty until Judgment Day. There was something primal about its operation. The weight of the wood, the roar of the bolt, the smell of burnt powder. It was not just a weapon, but a statement. American industry could take a gangster's gun and turn it into an instrument of liberation. By 1943, hundreds of thousands of Thompsons poured from factories, each one stamped with the promise of close-quarters supremacy. For the Germans who prized mechanical refinement, the Thompson seemed crude. Until they faced it, then they realized it was a weapon perfectly matched to the chaos of war. It didn't ask for finesse, it demanded courage. The moment you pulled that trigger, it filled the air with thunder, a rolling wall of .45 caliber defiance that no 9mm could match. And soon, in the villages of Sicily and the narrow alleys of Italy, that thunder would echo, teaching the Wehrmacht a new kind of fear. The American trench broom was sweeping its way through Europe. The first true test of the Thompson M1A1 came in the summer of 1943, when American troops stormed the beaches of Sicily. The air was thick with salt and smoke. the heat already suffocating by dawn. In the cramped landing craft, paratroopers and infantrymen gripped their new submachine guns, heavy, oily, and waiting to prove themselves. Some had trained with them for only a few days. Others had never fired one in combat. But when the ramps dropped and the first German and Italian machine guns opened fire, the Thompson's voice answered, deep, brutal, and unrelenting. Sicily's battlefields were built for close-quarters combat. Villages clung to cliffs. Streets barely wide enough for a jeep twisted like veins through stone walls, and every doorway was a potential ambush. For the Americans, the Thompson became the perfect equalizer. Its short barrel and thunderous .45 rounds turned corners and courtyards into sudden death zones. When German paratroopers tried to ambush advancing units near Gela, the Americans countered with bursts of Thompson fire that tore through shutters, sandbags, and stone. Within seconds, silence fell, broken only by the ring of empty magazines hitting the ground. Reports from officers describe the weapon as devastating in street fighting. The Thompson is a house cleaner, one platoon leader wrote. It clears a room faster than grenades. Its high rate of fire and heavy bullets shredded cover that would have stopped a 9mm. German troops quickly learned to fear the distinct, low, chugging roar that echoed through narrow alleys. The MP-40's high-pitched snap could not compete. In the ruins of Sicilian towns like Troina and Palermo, the Thompson became the American soldier's handshake with fate, short, loud, and final. By the time U.S. forces pushed into mainland Italy, the weapon had already earned its nickname, the American trench broom. Captured German reports described it with a mixture of disbelief and respect. One officer from the Hermann Göring Division wrote after the Battle of Caltagirone, "The Americans carry a machine pistol that fires very large bullets in rapid succession. The effect on morale and flesh alike is catastrophic. It is as though they sweep the air itself." In Italy, the fighting turned even more intimate. The country's hills, olive groves, and medieval towns became killing grounds where visibility rarely exceeded 50 yards. At Salerno, Anzio, and Monte Cassino, the Thompson came into its element. In the mud-soaked trenches along the Liri Valley, soldiers of the 36th Infantry Division used it to repel night raids. A burst from a Thompson didn't just kill, it stopped entire assaults. The .45 rounds struck with such force that bodies were flung backwards, the sound of the impact lost beneath the gun's own thunder. In the shattered towns north of Naples, combat often came down to seconds. Soldiers kicked open doors and cleared rooms one by one. A single pull of the trigger released a waterfall of lead that left no doubt who controlled the corridor. The Thompson doesn't speak, it shouts, and it never stutters. The weapon's reliability in the dust and rubble of Italy made it a favorite. While rifles jammed or bayonets snapped, the Thompson kept firing. It could be dropped in mud, dragged through water, and still cycle perfectly. Mechanics in the field joked that you could bury it for a week, dig it up, and it would still want to fight. But the Thompson was not only an American weapon. British and Canadian units, impressed by its performance, adopted it as well. In the narrow streets of Ortona, the Italian Stalingrad, Canadian troops used Thompsons to flush out German paratroopers hiding in cellars and upper floors. The weapon's heavy slugs ripped through plaster and brick, clearing the way for bayonet teams to move in. To the Allies, it was a symbol of aggression. To the Germans, a sound that meant death was close. Even elite German units like the Fallschirmjäger and Waffen-SS began to capture and reuse Thompsons whenever possible. They preferred it over their own MP-40s in close fights, despite the heavier ammunition. If you picked up a Thompson, recalled one German veteran after the war, you felt safe. It was solid, it never misfired, and it killed anything it hit. That grudging admiration was rare among the Wehrmacht, and it said everything about the weapon's impact. The Thompson also changed American tactics. Infantry squads began to organize their assaults around it.
In tight spaces, a Thompson man led the way, his job to suppress everything in front while the riflemen flanked. The weapon's sheer presence boosted confidence. Troops advancing through ruined towns knew they carried something that could dominate any close fight. They nicknamed it the Key, because wherever it went, doors opened. The downside, as always, was ammunition. In the chaos of close combat, soldiers often fired too much, too fast. After a firefight in Casino, one squad leader counted 1,200 rounds expended in under 15 minutes, nearly every magazine gone. Resupply teams worked non-stop to keep up, hauling heavy crates of .45 ACP rounds through mud and mortar fire. Still, no one complained. "You can't have too much of that noise," one Marine quipped later. "That noise saves lives." The Thompson's psychological power was as real as its physical one. German soldiers caught in its bursts often described panic before impact. The sound of 600 rounds per minute, deep, rhythmic, relentless, felt inhuman, like a machine breathing death. In urban fights, the echo bounced between walls, turning single bursts into an orchestra of chaos. "We felt hunted," a captured German infantryman confessed near Naples. "When you hear that gun, you don't move, you pray." And that was the Thompson's secret weapon, fear. It didn't just kill the body, it broke the will. Every pull of its trigger reminded the enemy that America's industrial heart was now beating on the battlefield, fast, loud, and unstoppable. By 1944, as Allied forces prepared for the invasion of Normandy, the Thompson had gone from a niche tool to a frontline icon. Officers, sergeants, paratroopers, engineers, everyone wanted one. It had earned its place in the pack, next to the M1 Garand and the BAR, as one of the instruments that defined the American advance. From the hot dust of Sicily to the freezing mountains of Italy, the Thompson M1A1 had proven its worth beyond question. It was no longer a relic of gangster myths or prohibition shootouts. It had become what John T. Thompson had always dreamed of, a soldier's weapon forged for the chaos of war. And soon, across the hedgerows of Normandy and the villages of northern France, it would meet its greatest trial yet. The Germans thought they had seen what the Thompson could do. They hadn't seen anything yet.
While the Thompson was rewriting the rules of urban warfare in Europe, half a world away it was carving another legend, this time in the jungles, caves, and coral ridges of the Pacific. If Europe was the war of steel and cities, the Pacific was the war of shadows and fire. There, amid humidity, rot, and swarming insects, the M1A1 Thompson became the Marines' best friend, and the Japanese soldiers' worst nightmare. The Pacific Islands were not made for rifles. The air was too thick, the vegetation too dense, and the fighting too close. A man could crawl 10 feet through ferns and still never see the enemy. In that claustrophobic hell, the Thompson's 600 rounds per minute and its heavy .45 ACP bullets became the perfect answer to jungle warfare. It didn't need distance, it needed only direction and courage. At Guadalcanal, the first major American offensive of the war, the Thompson arrived in small numbers, mostly carried by Marine NCOs, scouts, and platoon leaders. It was heavy, awkward, and soaked through with rain within minutes. But the first time the Japanese charged through the kunai grass screaming banzai, the Marines understood why they needed it. One burst from a Thompson cut through the darkness like lightning. The 45 rounds didn't just wound, they stopped men mid-run, flinging them backward with shocking force. When the sun rose the next morning, the battlefield was littered with bodies. The Marines, exhausted and shaken, looked down at the oily, smoking guns in their hands and knew this was survival made of steel. A young sergeant named William H. McMurray wrote home after that night. "They came in waves. We didn't aim, we just fired. The Thompson just kept talking. You could feel it humming in your arms.
I don't think I'll ever hear that sound again without seeing the flashes in the trees. In the months that followed, as the U.S. island hopped toward Japan, the Thompson went from tool to legend. Marines in Tarawa, Saipan, and Peleliu used it in every conceivable condition, under monsoon rains, inside volcanic tunnels, and even waist-deep in seawater. It was one of the few weapons that could be trusted to fire after being dragged through sand and coral. Its simple blowback design meant fewer parts to rust or seize. Maintenance became a ritual. Every night, Marines sat in foxholes, stripping and oiling their guns with rags soaked in whatever lubricant they could find, sometimes even motor oil from wrecked trucks. The M1A1's short barrel made it ideal for close assaults. In the narrow trenches and cave systems that riddled each island, the Thompson was both shield and sword. Marines developed tactics built around it, fire and flood, firing short bursts into a cave entrance while grenades and flamethrowers followed. Its distinctive rhythm, deep and thunderous, echoed through tunnels where sound had nowhere to escape. Japanese defenders learned to recognize it instantly and dread it. At Guadalcanal, Corporal Jack Yates led a small team clearing Japanese bunkers along the seawall. They moved low and fast, smoke swirling around them, grenades primed. When they reached the first bunker, Yates rolled the grenade inside, waited for the explosion, and then dove in behind the flash with his Thompson roaring. Within seconds, the gun had emptied its magazine. The fight was over. The Marines took the position and moved on. Later, Yates found his hands trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer vibration of the weapon's power. The Thompson's dominance wasn't limited to infantry. Navy Seabees, engineers, and even aircraft crews carried it for defense. Pilots on remote airstrips in the Solomons kept them within arm's reach in case of night raids. Patrol boat crews mounted them at rails for quick bursts during ambushes. Its versatility made it the Swiss Army knife of American firepower. But the Pacific also tested the weapon's limits. The humidity corroded unprotected steel, and sand worked its way into every crevice. The weight, over 10 pounds loaded, made it punishing to carry across volcanic terrain. Ammunition was heavy, and soldiers rationed magazines carefully. Still, no one doubted its value. You curse it while you carry it, but you bless it when the shooting starts, a Marine corporal said. In the sweltering jungles of New Guinea and Bougainville, the Thompson became an extension of instinct. Firing from the hip became second nature. The .45's massive impact often stopped enemies even through foliage or bamboo. Marines learned to shoot by sound, to track movement, squeeze, and trust the gun to do the rest. Many found themselves operating almost blind, relying on the Thompson's rhythm to mark the boundaries between life and death. The Japanese were fierce, disciplined, and willing to die rather than retreat. Their ambush tactics, crawling through mud, attacking from trees or holes, demanded speed in response. A rifle bolt was too slow. The Thompson's instant automatic fire saved countless lives. One Marine officer after the Battle of Peleliu summed it up this way: "If you had a Thompson, you lived through the first 10 seconds. After that, everything else was luck." In the labyrinth of Iwo Jima, where tunnels twisted beneath the volcanic rock, the Thompson was indispensable. Inside the caves, the air was filled with smoke and dust. Visibility dropped to inches. Firing a rifle was useless. But the Thompson, with its compact frame and brutal power, turned those underground chambers into execution grounds. Japanese soldiers, terrified of the gun's deep thunder, often tried to ambush at arm's length and died for it. Private Leo Walsh recalled one such fight. "You couldn't see a damn thing, just the flashes. I was crawling, firing one hand on the grip, one on the wall. The Thompson felt alive. It just wanted to keep going. When it stopped, the tunnel was quiet." When the battle ended, Iwo Jima's black sand was littered with spent .45 casings, small brass witnesses to the Thompson's grim efficiency. By war's end, The Japanese had learned to recognize the Thompson by ear alone. The slow rolling bark of .45 fire meant Americans were close, too close. Many Japanese diaries wrote about it with awe and fear. One Japanese sergeant wrote in 1944, "The enemy's short gun makes a sound like thunder. Its bullets tear through trees. When we hear it, we stay low and wait for the fire to pass." For the Americans, it was more than a weapon. It was a lifeline in a world where everything, the weather, the jungle, the enemy, was trying to kill them. They carried it ashore on every island, through every swamp and ridge, until it became part of the very image of the Pacific War. When the fighting finally ceased in 1945, many Marines kept their Thompsons until the last day, refusing to trade them for newer models. In their minds, it had earned a place beside them, like a brother. Its wooden stock scarred by coral, its metal etched by salt, the Thompson had survived what few men could. It had done what General Thompson had promised it would do decades earlier: sweep the trenches clean. Only now, those trenches stretched across oceans, jungles, and coral sands.
When the last guns fell silent in 1945, the world was littered with the wreckage of empires, and the Thompson M1A1 lay among it, scarred, blackened, but unbowed. It had traveled farther than any submachine gun before it, from the streets of Chicago to the beaches of Sicily, from the ruins of Normandy to the caves of Iwo Jima. Soldiers who carried it called it by many names: the Tommy, the Broom, the Lifesaver. But to those who faced it, it was something else entirely: the voice of a new kind of warfare, fast, close, and terrifying. The Germans, who had prided themselves on mechanical precision, could never quite understand the Thompson. The MP-40 was neat and efficient, but it fired the light 9mm Parabellum, a round that relied on accuracy and volume rather than brute force. The Americans, on the other hand, had built a weapon that didn't ask permission from physics. Its .45 ACP slugs were slow, fat, and devastating. Bullets that didn't slip through the air so much as shove it aside. A German lieutenant captured after Normandy said it best: "Our machine pistols sting, theirs crush." Captured reports from the Wehrmacht intelligence referred to the Thompson as die amerikanische Dabenfigger, the American trench broom. The nickname stuck, not because of propaganda, but because it fit. Wherever the Thompson appeared, it swept clean whatever lay in front of it: rooms, bunkers, or entire squads. German infantry learned quickly that when they heard that slow, deep roar, the fight was already lost. The psychological weight of the weapon was immense. Combat was as much about nerves as about numbers, and the Thompson shattered nerves like glass. Its sound was unmistakable, not the metallic chatter of an MP-40, nor the crisp bursts of a rifle, but a deep, steady hammering that filled the air with finality. In the confusion of close combat, that sound became a signal to friend and foe alike that the Americans were inside the wire. Soldiers said you could feel the Thompson before you heard it, the pressure of its blasts, the low-frequency thump that shook the chest. The .45 ACP's stopping power contributed to the weapon's legend. At 50 yards, a single round could end a man's charge even through cover. At 10 yards, it was simply unstoppable. German medics treating the wounded learned to identify Thompson hits instantly: wide entry wounds, crushed tissue, and no exit. Against that kind of force, courage meant little. In the Pacific, the Japanese experienced it firsthand. Their diaries, found after battles like Saipan and Iwo Jima, spoke of the short American gun that spits thunder. One officer wrote, "When it fires, it is like the beating of drums. Men fall before they can shout." The Thompson had turned the American soldier into a walking wall of fire, an image that terrified even the most fanatical opponents. But behind the fear, there was admiration. German troops who captured Thompsons often kept them, calling them Beutewaffen, war prizes. They valued the gun's reliability, its ruggedness, and the sheer authority it carried. A veteran of the 12th SS Panzer Division recalled after the war, "We had nothing like it. It was heavy, yes, but you could feel the quality. When it fired, it was like the gun was alive." That respect crossed oceans. In the ruins of Europe and Asia, soldiers on every side knew its silhouette. The straight magazine, the ribbed barrel, the wooden stock that seemed carved from a single idea: power. For American troops, it became a symbol of confidence, the weapon that never failed when things got close and ugly. When peace finally came, the Thompson story didn't end there. It continued to serve in Korea, Vietnam, and countless smaller conflicts around the world. Allied nations received them in crates stamped U.S. property, and soon police forces, rebels, and freedom fighters alike were carrying the same weapon that had stormed Sicily and Tarawa. The Thompson became in many ways the global language of modern combat: simple, loud, effective, and unmistakably American. Back home, its legend grew even larger. War correspondents had photographed it slung over the shoulders of paratroopers and Marines, and Hollywood turned those images into icons. In post-war films and newsreels, the Thompson became shorthand for the grit and determination of the American fighting man. It was no longer the gangster's weapon of the 1920s. It had been reborn as the soldier's sidearm of democracy. Veterans who returned home often couldn't bear to part with theirs. Some brought Thompsons back illegally, hiding them in duffel bags or burying them in barns. For them, the weapon was a relic of survival, a reminder of the nights they had fought alone with only the roar of the gun for company. In veterans' reunions decades later, they would recall the way it felt to fire: the weight in the hands, the recoil in the shoulder, the satisfaction of knowing that when you squeezed that trigger, it would never let you down. The M1A1 Thompson eventually gave way to newer designs, the MP3, grease gun, then the M16. But none carried the same aura. The Thompson had been born of an idea too human to fade: that sometimes victory depends not on perfection, but on raw, unrelenting power. It had proved that a weapon could be both crude and divine, a piece of engineering so simple, yet so perfectly suited to its moment in history that it changed the very psychology of battle. Even in the era of drones and digital targeting, the Thompson's influence remains. Its descendants live in every modern submachine gun: the MP5, the Uzi, the P90, all owe something to its philosophy: fire fast, hit hard, and never stop moving. Today, in museums and private collections, the M1A1 Thompson rests silent behind glass, its metal dulled with age, its stock scarred from years of war. But if you look closely, you can almost hear it: the low, rhythmic roar of .45 rounds echoing across the ruins of Europe and the jungles of the Pacific. It is the sound of an army advancing, of fear turned into fury, of a weapon that defined a generation. General John T. Thompson's original dream, a trench broom that could sweep away the enemy, had come true, though not in the muddy trenches of France he had imagined. It had found its purpose in a new kind of war, fought across continents and oceans. And in doing so, it had become more than a gun. It had become a symbol of American ingenuity, of industrial might, and of the terrifying intimacy of modern combat. Long after the men who carried it were gone, the Thompson's echo remained, in every burst of close-quarters fire, in every movie scene of soldiers charging through smoke, in every retelling of battles where courage met chaos. The Germans had called it the trench broom. The Americans simply called it the Thompson. And for those who lived through its fire, that was enough.